Welcome back. Deep within the remote Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia lies a hollow that few dare to enter, and fewer still survive the experience unchanged. Locals speak of it in hushed tones, a place where the trees themselves seem to whisper warnings, and where shadows stretch longer than natural law allows. It is here, amidst the mist and crumbling ridges, that Martha Gallagher once lived, a woman whose grief would not remain private, whose sorrow would echo across generations, and whose influence, some say, has yet to end. Martha was not always a figure of fear. In her youth, she was known for her gentle nature and quiet strength, married to a miner whose life was claimed by the very earth he worked in 1951. The tragedy fractured her world, but what came next would fracture much more than her heart. After his death, neighbors recall subtle but unsettling changes. Martha wandering the hills at night, speaking to unseen figures, and keeping vigil by the family cabin as if waiting for something, or someone, that would never return. It was as if grief alone had awakened something older, darker, and far more powerful than human comprehension. Stories from the hollow begin with small, almost invisible disturbances. Livestock found dead in impossible positions, unexplained footprints in the snow, whispers heard through closed doors. Then the disappearances began. Friends and family members reported strange behaviors, visions, compulsions, dreams that led them back to the mountains. Those who entered Martha's domain often returned forever altered, speaking of shadowed figures and impossible landscapes that mirrored the hollow itself. Some vanished entirely, swallowed by the wilderness, leaving only the echo of their fear behind. Historical records reveal that the land beneath the Gallagher cabin was never ordinary. Archaeological surveys conducted decades later uncovered remnants of pre-Columbian activity. Ceremonial fire pits, stone arrangements, and burial mounds that hinted at spiritual significance far older than European settlers. Tribal histories, passed down orally by Cherokee elders before forced removal in the 1830s, warned of precisely these places, thresholds where the veil between worlds thinned, where the equilibrium of the living could be shattered by those unaware of the ancient safeguards. Even now, decades after Martha's disappearance, her influence is felt. Hunters avoid certain trails, hikers report eerie visions, and locals swear they hear her voice on the wind, calling to the lonely or the curious. The hollow has become a magnet for the inexplicable, a place where grief and history converge into something alive and watchful. It is here at the intersection of human tragedy and forces beyond understanding that our story begins. Before we continue with the story and unspeakable secrets, I want to ask something important. This channel is not for everyone. Only the bravest souls who dare to confirm the darkest chapters of Appalachian history. If you made it this far, you are not like most people. You understand some truths are too horrifying to ignore, no matter how much they disturb us. So hit that subscribe button and join our community of true mystery seekers. And tell me in the comments, what state are you listening from? Are you brave enough to hear a story like this from your own backyard? Next we discover the Gallagher family history, a lineage marked by grief, disappearances, and a darkness that seems to follow the bloodline across generations. And to understand the haunting in the hollow, we must look deeper into the bloodline of Martha Gallagher, a family whose history seems irrevocably intertwined with tragedy, disappearance, and inexplicable phenomena. This is a lineage that stretches back over a century, one where grief and misfortune follow the family like shadows cast long before birth. The earliest recorded incident occurred in 1883, when Sarah Gallagher, Martha's great-grandmother, vanished without a trace following the death of her husband in a logging accident. Contemporary newspaper accounts tell of her increasingly erratic behavior, of nights spent wandering the forest with whispered conversations, and a slow descent into a grief that neighbors described as almost unnatural. The pattern repeated with remarkable consistency. Family members living in remote, isolated homes who, after losing a spouse, began exhibiting unusual behavior, culminating in their disappearance. Rebecca Gallagher Walsh, Martha's aunt, experienced a similar fate in 1923. After her husband succumbed to influenza, she reportedly spent weeks in isolation, muttering about visions only she could see. When she vanished, local authorities assumed she had succumbed to the harsh winter or wandering off in confusion. Yet letters and diaries discovered decades later suggest something far darker, an awareness within the family that these tragedies were part of a recurring, inexplicable phenomenon, a burden the Gallaghers attempted to conceal from outsiders. Private correspondence reveals the family's quiet acknowledgement of what they called the old darkness. In a letter dated 1952, Martha's mother confided to her sister, "I fear Martha carries the old curse stronger than any who came before. Thomas sees it too, though he won't speak of it directly. The dreams have started, the same dreams that took mother and grandmother before her. We should have warned him before the wedding, but Martha seemed so normal then, so untouched by the old darkness." The recurring theme was always the same: loss of a spouse, followed by grief that spiraled into visions, compulsions, and eventually disappearance. The Gallagher's isolation in rural Appalachia amplified the phenomenon, cutting them off from intervention or aid. Neighbors often noted an unsettling stillness around their homes, a quiet that seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the land itself waited for the next family member to succumb. Even industrial disruptions, mining, logging, road building, seemingly intensified the pattern. Equipment failures, accidents, and strange occurrences consistently clustered near Gallagher properties. Unofficial accounts hint at workers who reported visions, unexplained noises, or shadows that didn't belong to anyone present. While authorities dismissed these as coincidence or superstition, the family quietly recorded their own observations, aware that what they faced was something far beyond ordinary explanation. The stage was set for Martha Gallagher. Born into a lineage marked by grief and the inexplicable, she inherited more than just family stories. She inherited a living, almost sentient darkness, tied to the very land her ancestors had settled on. This was a hollow already charged with centuries of spiritual significance, a place where the boundaries of life and death were thin, fragile, and easily disturbed. Next, we discover Clara Ara Morrison, Martha's second cousin in Kentucky, whose fate eerily mirrors Martha's own, hinting at a wider family network entangled with the supernatural. The story of the Gallaghers is not confined to West Virginia. Just over the border in Floyd County, Kentucky, another family bore a haunting strikingly similar to Martha Gallagher's. Clara Morrison, Martha's second cousin, lived in an isolated homestead tucked deep within Appalachian hollows. Like Martha, she endured the loss of a husband, this time in a mining accident in 1951, a tragedy that appeared to awaken the same unnerving behaviors seen in her cousin. Local residents remember Clara as a reserved woman, gentle yet increasingly withdrawn, who spent long hours alone in the mountains. She kept meticulous letters, which later surfaced in family archives, detailing her fascination with Martha's spiritual practices. Clara wrote of Martha's discovery of knowledge predating European settlement, hinting at rituals, protective sites, and a hidden spiritual landscape that had long been overlooked by the modern world. Clara vanished in 1959 under circumstances that mirrored Martha's disappearance almost precisely. Her home, left untouched, revealed no evidence of struggle, only the quiet remnants of a life abruptly abandoned. Archaeological investigations decades later confirmed that both the Morrison and Gallagher properties were built on sites sacred to the Cherokee Nation before their forced removal in the 1830s. Tribal oral histories spoke of these hollows as thresholds where the veil between worlds thinned, a place requiring continuous spiritual vigilance to prevent restless spirits from crossing into the living realm. Joseph Crow Feather, a Cherokee elder interviewed in the 1970s, warned of doorways in specific mountain hollows. According to his testimony, these sites were once carefully maintained, their equilibrium preserved by ritual. With the removal of the Cherokee, centuries of spiritual safeguards vanished, leaving the land unguarded for the first time in generations. The resulting disturbances, Crow Feather suggested, were not random. They were the inevitable consequence of abandoning protections that had kept human communities safe for centuries. Clara letters, combined with Crow Feather's testimony, revealed chilling connections. Both she and Martha were drawn to these sites, perhaps sensing the thin boundary themselves. Both experienced dreams, compulsions, and an unrelenting pull toward the hollow. Both disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. These parallel fates suggest that whatever force haunted the Gallagher line did not respect state boundaries. It followed the bloodline, the land, and possibly the very consciousness of those connected to it. By examining the Morrison and Gallagher cases together, a pattern emerges. Grief following the loss of a spouse triggers a susceptibility to forces tied to ancient, disturbed grounds. Isolation amplifies the effect. The more the family interacts with the hollow, the stronger the influence becomes, extending beyond physical boundaries into psychological and even digital realms in the modern era. Next, we discover the archaeological evidence, pre-Columbian symbols, and Cherokee spiritual practices that hint at why these specific hollows became epicenters of supernatural activity. The hollows that claimed Martha Gallagher and Clara Morrison were not random landscapes. They were deliberate sites of spiritual significance long before European settlers arrived. Archaeologists and historians investigating the Gallagher and Morrison properties uncovered a startling array of pre-Columbian artifacts: ceremonial fire pits, stone circles, and burial mounds, all carefully arranged with symbolic patterns consistent with Cherokee spiritual traditions. These sites were more than mere settlements, they were thresholds. Cherokee oral histories preserved over generations describe certain hollows as points where the boundary between the physical world and the spirit realm thinned. Rituals conducted there maintained balance, ensuring the spirits of the dead remained on their side of the veil. When the Cherokee were forcibly removed in the 1830s, these rituals ceased, leaving the doorways unguarded, a vulnerability that would ripple across generations. The artifacts tell a consistent story: symbols etched into stones, charred remains of ceremonial fires, and burial mounds all correspond to traditions surrounding death, ancestral communication, and the containment of restless spirits. Scholars note that these ceremonial patterns were not isolated to one site. They appear repeatedly across the Appalachian region, suggesting a network of spiritual maintenance that spanned centuries. Genealogical research into the Gallagher family reveals a disturbing inheritance. Across 150 years, family members living in isolated rural locations consistently experienced unexplained phenomena, often following the sudden death of a spouse. Sarah Gallagher disappeared after her husband's logging accident in 1883. Martha's aunt, Rebecca Walsh, vanished in 1923 following the influenza pandemic. Letters hidden in family archives reveal that the Gallaghers were aware of the pattern and debated whether to warn new family members marrying into the line. The warning was always the same: the grief of loss, combined with isolation near sacred grounds, could awaken forces beyond comprehension. Industrial disruption magnified these ancient risks. Mining and logging operations frequently intersected with sacred Cherokee sites. The Blackwater Creek mine, where Thomas Gallagher perished, was constructed directly atop a Cherokee burial ground, despite warnings. Records from the 1950s document equipment malfunctions, disappearances, and inexplicable psychological effects among workers, phenomena that intensified during night shifts. Supervisors developed unofficial protocols to avoid or manage these cursed areas, tacitly acknowledging a reality that defied conventional explanation. The convergence of ancient spiritual practice, disturbed landscapes, and family vulnerability created the perfect conditions for Martha Gallagher's enduring influence. The hollows themselves seem alive, resonating with energies that human understanding struggles to categorize. This is a force not contained by time, geography, or even the living, one that begins in the soil, spreads through the bloodline, and now, in the digital age, reaches into minds far removed from Appalachia itself. Next, we discover how the Gallaghers' influence extends beyond the mountains, infiltrating international locations and even the digital world, leaving modern researchers and unwitting victims in its grip. The influence of Martha Gallagher is no longer confined to the hollows of West Virginia. In the digital age, her presence has transcended geography, infiltrating minds across continents through photographs, videos, and written descriptions. Online communities dedicated to paranormal investigation have documented cases of individuals experiencing the characteristic dreams, compulsions, and visions after merely viewing images of the Gallagher cabin or reading detailed accounts. Dr. Michael Chen, a computer scientist at Stanford University, studied the neurological effects of these digital transmissions. He discovered that viewing images associated with the Gallagher property activated regions of the temporal lobe linked to memory formation and spatial navigation, even in individuals with no prior knowledge of the Appalachian hollows. These brain patterns created a psychological imprint, leaving viewers susceptible to the same dreams and compulsions that had affected physical visitors. Remarkably, The digital phenomenon appears to intensify over time. Subjects repeatedly exposed to Gallagher-related imagery showed progressively stronger neurological responses. The imprint deepened, suggesting that the influence could evolve into the same dangerous compulsions experienced by those who physically entered the hollow. It's a psychological contagion, a modern vector for an ancient, supernatural force. International cases illustrate the breadth of her reach. Henrik Len, a Norwegian software developer, began experiencing vivid visions of the hollow in February 2018 after participating in an online discussion about American supernatural sites. His dreams escalated from vague imagery to precise, geographically accurate visions of the Gallagher cabin, including interiors destroyed decades earlier. Verified sketches confirm details from 1956 crime scene photographs, never released, publicly. Len's obsession eventually led him to travel to West Virginia, following a path that mirrors decades of previous disappearances. His rental car was found abandoned at the trailhead long associated with vanished investigators. Across Europe and Asia, similar reports have emerged, individuals with no cultural or historical ties to Appalachia experiencing the same compulsions, dreams, and obsessive behaviors. Even children in the United States, far removed from Appalachian culture, have produced artwork depicting the hollow and the gaunt, sorrowful widow. These children show remarkable knowledge of the mountains, and some have attempted to guide the widow to their homes, claiming she needs company. Psychologists studying these cases note that these children have no prior exposure to relevant folklore, making the phenomenon direct and inexplicable. Martha Gallagher's influence has evolved into a force that transcends distance, culture, and medium. The hollows themselves are no longer the sole locus of her power. Her reach now extends across digital networks, affecting minds and behaviors globally. This is not folklore. It is a living, expanding force of consciousness with consequences that modern science struggles to comprehend. Next, we discover how these phenomena create tangible societal and economic consequences, impacting property values, tourism, and rural communities across Appalachia. Martha Gallagher's hollow does not merely haunt minds, it haunts communities. Over the past several decades, areas identified as active supernatural hotspots have suffered dramatic economic consequences. Property values in these regions have plummeted by nearly 40%, creating zones of poverty and abandonment that amplify the eerie reputation of the mountains. Families who remain find themselves trapped between fear and necessity, unable to sell or leave without risking exposure to the hollow's growing influence. Insurance companies have quietly adapted, creating policies that effectively exclude coverage for paranormal-related claims. Homes near Gallagher sites are deemed uninsurable for incidents deemed supernatural in origin, leaving owners vulnerable to unexplained destruction, equipment failure, or environmental anomalies. Even minor disturbances, like doors slamming, livestock disappearing, or erratic weather, often go unaddressed, dismissed as the cost of living too close to the hollow. The tourism industry has attempted to capitalize on the legend, offering ghost tours and paranormal investigations. Yet these ventures are fraught with danger. Guides report sudden equipment malfunctions, inexplicable injuries, and groups experiencing overwhelming fear, nausea, and visions similar to the dreams of direct visitors. High turnover and abandoned businesses illustrate a simple truth. Active Gallagher sites resist exploitation. The hollow does not welcome spectators, it recruits them. Local businesses struggle to maintain normal operations. Employees report chronic nightmares, a sense of being watched, and compulsions to visit remote areas, mirroring the behaviors seen in those directly exposed to Gallagher's influence. Economic instability ripples outward. Grocery stores, gas stations, and schools face staff shortages and unexplained accidents, while communities grow, increasingly insular. The hollow, in effect, creates microcosms of social collapse, feeding on both fear and abandonment. Public infrastructure is subtly affected as well. Roads to remote hollows deteriorate faster than expected. Logging companies report accidents and missing equipment, and local hospitals quietly treat patients exhibiting symptoms resembling Gallagher syndrome, severe exhaustion, dehydration, and neurological trauma. These medical cases, often dismissed as stress-related or psychiatric, quietly bolster the hollow's aura, deterring outsiders from entering. The broader implication is stark. The hollow's presence reshapes not only minds, but entire communities. It destabilizes economies, isolates residents, and produces a psychological contagion that spreads through social networks, amplifying the hollow's reach. In Appalachia, the shadow of Martha Gallagher is both tangible and pervasive, one that cannot be measured merely in folklore or ghost stories. Next, we discover the physical and neurological toll of Gallagher phenomena on individuals, including persistent brain changes and physiological trauma that defy conventional science. Beyond property and community disruption, the hollow takes a more intimate toll on the human body and mind itself. Medical professionals in West Virginia and surrounding states have documented a pattern of symptoms now collectively referred to as Gallagher syndrome. Patients exhibit extreme exhaustion, severe dehydration, and neurological changes that cannot be explained by conventional medicine. Their distress appears linked not to visible injuries or environmental toxins, but to prolonged exposure, direct or indirect, to the influence of Martha Gallagher's hollow. Dr. Patricia Santos, an emergency physician in Charleston, has treated 17 documented cases over the past decade. Each patient presents strikingly similar symptoms: persistent fatigue, disrupted sleep patterns dominated by vivid dreams of rural hollows, and neurological markers suggesting prolonged stress. Brain scans reveal heightened activity in the temporal lobes, regions associated with memory, spatial awareness, and emotional processing. Remarkably, these patterns persist even under sedation, as though consciousness itself remains active and connected to the hollow. Blood tests reveal chemical signatures consistent with trauma: elevated cortisol, unusual neurotransmitter levels, and cellular markers typically linked to extreme stress. Yet patients report no physical danger, only recurring visions or dreams. Their minds have been altered, imprinted with the hollow's presence. Psychiatric evaluations reveal shared delusions, conversations with Martha Gallagher, perceived obligations to guide others to the hollow, and overwhelming guilt when these obligations are not met. These delusions are identical across patients with no prior contact, suggesting a transmission of consciousness independent of cultural or geographical context. Disturbingly, exposure is not limited to physical visitors, digital empire. Media, photographs, videos, and detailed descriptions of the hollow trigger measurable neurological changes. Dr. Michael Chen, a Stanford computer scientist, observed that subjects viewing images of the Gallagher cabin displayed spatial awareness and memory activation as if they had visited the location. Repeated exposure intensified these responses, creating a cumulative effect resembling the compulsions experienced by those who physically entered the hollow. The hollow's influence appears contagious, infectious even, capable of altering brain structure and behavior across generations. Attempts to isolate or study the phenomenon have often backfired. Researchers and graduate students analyzing Gallagher syndrome cases frequently develop the same dreams, compulsions, and neurological markers they are studying, forcing strict, indirect research protocols. The human cost is profound. Individuals are transformed, their perceptions and behaviors reshaped by a force that defies science. Gallagher syndrome illustrates that the hollow's danger is not only supernatural, it is tangible, measurable, and irreversible in many cases. Next, we explore how modern eyewitness accounts reveal that Martha Gallagher's presence is growing more aggressive, manifesting an increasingly coordinated supernatural activity in the Appalachian wilderness. Those who venture into the Appalachian wilderness today report phenomena far more active and coordinated than the subtle anomalies recorded in the mid-20th century. Local hunters, hikers, and residents describe encounters that suggest Martha Gallagher's influence is no longer passive. It is deliberate, organized, and increasingly aggressive. David Morrison, a hunting guide in Pocahontas County for over 30 years, has meticulously logged his experiences since 1990. His notes chronicle a disturbing evolution: environmental irregularities in the forest, whispered voices, cold spots, fleeting shadows, have gradually escalated into direct confrontations. Morrison documents groups of people moving with unnerving precision, traveling single file toward Gallagher Hollow. From a distance, these figures appear normal, but closer observation reveals coordinated, almost hypnotic behavior. Morrison calls these gatherings recruitment parties. Most alarmingly, members of these groups have been recognized as individuals reported missing decades ago. Morrison identifies Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a folklore researcher who disappeared in 1963 as part of a party he observed in October 2019. Photographs he captured, while blurred due to equipment malfunctions, reveal figures casting no shadows despite bright sunlight, a phenomenon independent analysts could neither attribute to digital manipulation nor natural anomalies. Statistical analysis shows that these supernatural gatherings follow predictable cycles. Peak activity coincides with astronomical events, particularly new moons in late October and November. Dr. Robert Chen, a statistician at Johns Hopkins University, calculated correlations showing a 340% increase in activity during optimal conditions, confirming a pattern far beyond coincidence. This cyclical behavior suggests Martha Gallagher operates according to rules unknown to conventional science, an intelligence or natural force dictating the timing and coordination of her influence. The human aspect is equally alarming. Encounters with recruitment parties induce compulsions in witnesses. Those who see them report dreams, urges, and behaviors linked to the hollow, often weeks after the event. The hollow's reach is not merely physical, it manipulates minds, guiding new participants toward its center, reinforcing the legacy of Martha Gallagher's influence over generations. Morrison's logs reveal a frightening trend. The hollow's reach is expanding, influencing not only local residents but also visitors from distant regions, amplifying both psychological and supernatural effects. The hollow is no longer confined to its immediate geography. It is growing, learning, and recruiting. Next we explore the alarming patterns of disappearance and supernatural influence extending internationally, showing that Martha Gallagher's reach now transcends continents. What began as a localized curse in the Appalachian Mountains has, over decades, spread far beyond the forests of West Virginia, reaching corners of the globe once thought immune to its influence. Modern investigators now confront a chilling reality. Martha Gallagher's reach transcends geography, manifesting in people who have never set foot in her hollow. The phenomenon often begins innocuously. Online communities dedicated to paranormal research document cases where individuals, after viewing photographs, reading detailed accounts, or watching videos of the Gallagher property, experience vivid dreams and compulsions reminiscent of those felt by direct visitors. Dr. Michael Chen, a computer scientist at Stanford University, has studied these cases extensively. His research reveals measurable neurological changes in subjects exposed to images of Gallagher Hollow. Temporal lobe activation patterns linked to memory formation and spatial navigation, regions of the brain previously dormant in these contexts, ignite even in people with no prior connection to Appalachia. The spread is cumulative. Repeated exposure amplifies neurological responses, creating susceptibility to dreams, compulsions, and visions akin to those experienced by direct visitors. The digital transmission of Gallagher phenomena transforms the curse into a modern contagion, leaving researchers struggling to explain a psychological imprint that behaves like a mimetic, almost parasitic, force. International cases underscore the breadth of influence. Henrik Len, a Norwegian software developer, began experiencing precise visions of Gallagher Hollow in 2018 after participating in online discussions about American supernatural phenomena. His dreams progressed into accurate, detailed depictions of the hollow's interior, rooms destroyed decades before his birth. Independent verification confirmed his sketches mapped out. Ched original crime scene photographs withheld from public release. Despite interventions by mental health professionals, Len ultimately traveled to West Virginia, vanishing in the same pattern as countless investigators before him, leaving only his car at the trailhead. The global spread is not limited to adults. Cases involving children with no exposure to Appalachian culture reveal alarming consistency. Artwork depicting the hollow, the tall, lonely figure of Martha Gallagher, and knowledge of local geography. Children report feeling compelled to guide or help the widow, often attempting to leave home at night to visit the hollow. Psychologists confirm these children exhibit no prior exposure to Appalachian folklore, suggesting the phenomenon transmits independently of conventional learning. Martha Gallagher's influence now functions as both local and global, a force capable of crossing cultural and physical boundaries. Her hollow has become a nexus, bridging time, space, and consciousness, ensuring the continuation of her legacy and expanding the shadow of her reach. Next we explore How these global manifestations tie back to neurological and physiological changes in affected individuals, revealing the horrifying depth of Gallagher's control over human consciousness. And the influence of Martha Gallagher is no longer just a matter of dreams and visions, it leaves an indelible mark on the human body. Doctors and researchers treating individuals affected by what has become known as Gallagher syndrome have documented alarming physiological changes that defy conventional explanation. Dr. Patricia Santos, an emergency physician in Charleston, West Virginia, has treated 17 patients over the past decade exhibiting consistent symptoms. These individuals present with severe dehydration, exhaustion, and neurological anomalies that suggest extreme stress exposure, despite having experienced no visible trauma. Blood tests reveal chemical markers associated with prolonged exposure to life-threatening situations, though patients report only dreams or brief mental journeys to remote rural locations. Their brain activity, even under sedation, remains unusually focused on external stimuli, as though consciousness itself is tethered to Gallagher Hollow. Psychiatric evaluations reveal shared delusions. Patients recount detailed conversations with Martha Gallagher, including personal history that has never been publicly documented. They describe compulsions to bring others to the Hollow, feeling guilt for failing to fulfill these obligations. The phenomenon exhibits a form of psychological infection, transmitted through both physical and digital exposure, leaving the human mind and body inextricably linked to Gallagher's influence. Laboratory brain imaging studies confirm permanent structural changes in regions responsible for memory formation and spatial awareness. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a neuroscientist at MIT, warns that these changes are progressive, intensifying over time rather than diminishing. Individuals exposed repeatedly to Gallagher phenomena develop increasingly abnormal brain activity, suggesting that the Hollow's influence ingrains itself deeply into the fabric of consciousness. Even more concerning, investigators studying these effects are themselves vulnerable. Graduate students assigned to analyze Gallagher syndrome cases report experiencing identical dreams and compulsions, forcing research protocols to shift toward remote analysis and data review. The Hollow, it seems, extends its reach to those who attempt to study it. Martha Gallagher's power is both psychological and physiological, transcending traditional boundaries of human perception. The Hollow shapes not only the mind but the body, creating a living, growing imprint of fear, compulsion, and spectral obsession. Next, we discover the modern eyewitness accounts in Appalachia that reveal an escalation of Gallagher phenomena, including organized groups appearing at the Hollow, people drawn inexplicably into her growing network of influence. As decades have passed since Martha Gallagher's death, eyewitness reports from the Appalachian region indicate that her influence has grown more active, more deliberate, and far more organized. Hunters, hikers, and local residents describe encounters that defy conventional explanation, suggesting the Hollow is no longer a static place of residual energy. It has become a living nexus, drawing people into its sphere of control. David Morrison, a hunting guide in Pocahontas County for over 30 years, has meticulously documented encounters since 1990. His logs reveal a chilling progression. Environmental anomalies, shadows moving independently of light, strange sounds in the forest, have escalated into direct confrontations with groups of individuals, what Morrison calls recruitment parties. At first glance, these groups appear normal, moving quietly through the woods. But closer observation reveals unnaturally coordinated behavior, as if guided by a shared, unseen purpose. Most alarming are Morrison's identifications of these participants. Many are long-missing individuals, some last seen decades earlier while investigating or living near Gallagher Hollow. Among them, he reports spotting Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a folklore researcher who vanished in 1963. Morrison's photographs of these gatherings are blurry due to equipment malfunctions, another recurring hallmark in the Hollow, but independent analysis confirms no digital tampering. Figures within the groups cast no shadows, even in broad daylight, leaving scientists puzzled and local observers terrified. These recruitment parties do not merely wander, they seem to act with intent, traveling in single file toward the Hollow. Attempts at communication fail, as if the participants are psychologically severed from ordinary human interaction. Morrison notes that proximity to these groups induces subtle psychological effets. Fleeting visions of the Hollow, obsessive thoughts, and even involuntary dreams resembling those reported by direct visitors. The pattern extends beyond Appalachia. Internationally, similar phenomena have emerged. Individuals in Europe, Asia, and South America report compulsions to travel to remote forests or recreate the hollow in detailed artwork or digital maps. These accounts suggest that Martha Gallagher's reach has transcended physical space, creating a global network of influence that continues to grow. Next, we uncover the cyclical and astronomical patterns tied to Gallagher phenomena, revealing that her influence is not random, but follows precise, natural rhythms that amplify her power across time and space. Our evidence suggests that Martha Gallagher's influence is not chaotic. It is governed by cycles, subtle yet precise rhythms tied to the movements of the moon, the turning of the seasons, and natural astronomical phenomena. Local residents and researchers alike have noted a pattern. Activity spikes during new moon periods, particularly in late October and November, coinciding with the traditional harvest and All Hallows season. Dr. Robert Chen, a statistician at Johns Hopkins University, has painstakingly analyzed decades of reports, disappearances, and documented encounters. His data reveals a staggering correlation. Supernatural phenomena increase by over 340% during optimal astronomical alignments, far exceeding what chance alone could produce. Chen's findings suggest that the hollow itself reacts to these celestial cues, as though Martha Gallagher's consciousness, fused with the landscape, tunes itself to the cosmos, amplifying her reach and influence. The implications are terrifying. These cycles indicate that Gallagher's power is not static, but grows predictably, intensifying at precise intervals. Seasonal and lunar alignments serve as conduits, drawing new victims into the hollow and strengthening the psychological imprint on those who have already encountered her. For researchers, this means that timing alone can trigger supernatural events, even among individuals with no prior exposure to Appalachian folklore. Local accounts support Chen's models. Hunters report subtle changes in animal behavior, unexpected cold spots, and whispered voices in the forest during peak activity periods. Those who venture near the hollow during these times experience heightened compulsion, dreams, hallucinations, and in extreme cases, visions of the sad widow herself, reaching through the veil of reality. Morrison's logs document recruitment parties moving with unusual precision during these celestial peaks, as if guided by the same unseen calendar. Even digital exposure appears affected. Individuals engaging with images or video recordings of the hollow during new moon periods report intensified dreams, hallucinations, and compulsions. Dr. Michael Chen, a neuroscientist at Stanford, has noted that temporal lobe activity spikes dramatically in subjects exposed to these stimuli during astronomical alignments, reinforcing the idea that the hollow cycles extend beyond the physical world and into consciousness itself. Next, we explore the neurological and physiological consequences of prolonged exposure to Gallagher phenomena, revealing how the hollow imprints itself on the human brain in ways modern science struggles to explain. The influence of Martha Gallagher extends far beyond folklore or eyewitness accounts. Modern neuroscience reveals a chilling truth. Prolonged exposure to Gallagher phenomena leaves permanent, measurable changes in the human brain. Researchers have coined the term Gallagher syndrome to describe the cluster of neurological, psychological, and physiological effects consistently observed in victims. Dr. Patricia Santos, an emergency physician in Charleston, West Virginia, has treated 17 confirmed cases over the past decade. Patients present with extreme exhaustion, dehydration, and symptoms typically associated with prolonged life-threatening stress. Brain imaging shows abnormal activation patterns in the temporal lobes, regions responsible for memory, spatial navigation, and emotional processing. Remarkably, these patterns persist even under sedation, suggesting consciousness remains externally focused on the hollow's influence. Blood tests reveal chemical markers consistent with extreme physiological trauma, despite no visible injuries. Dr. Santos describes these markers as evidence of life-threatening experiences endured entirely in the mind, yet physically expressed by the body. Patients report dreams so vivid and detailed they feel indistinguishable from reality, visions of the hollow, the widow herself, and precise geographical details that should be impossible to know. Psychiatric evaluations reveal shared delusions among unrelated individuals. Despite having no contact, they describe interactions with Martha Gallagher, receive instructions to guide others to the hollow, and feel guilt for failing these tasks. The compulsions are deeply ingrained, often leading to sleep deprivation, obsessive behavior, and in some cases, attempts to physically reach the hollow. Children, adults, and even trained researchers are not immune. 3 MIT graduate students studying this, a phenomenon developed Gallagher syndrome mid-research, forcing a suspension of field investigations. Neuroscientist Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, working with MIT's Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences, warns that Gallagher syndrome may represent an infectious form of consciousness modification. Exposure occurs through both physical visitation and digital media, creating a contagious cycle of influence. Her classified reports advise immediate containment protocols, likening unchecked spread to a public health emergency. What is perhaps most disturbing is the permanence of these changes. Affected individuals exhibit progressive neurological alterations rather than returning to baseline. Spatial memory, emotional processing, and impulse control are slowly rewired, leaving victims increasingly vulnerable to the hollow's control. Gallagher syndrome demonstrates that Martha Gallagher's influence is not a story of the past. It is an ongoing, evolving force capable of reshaping human consciousness itself. Next, we uncover how these neurological changes translate into real-world behavior, including obsessive compulsion, recruitment patterns, and the growing international reach of Gallagher's influence. And the influence of Martha Gallagher is no longer confined to the hollow or its immediate surroundings. Modern accounts reveal a terrifying pattern. Individuals affected by Gallagher syndrome exhibit compulsive behaviors that actively recruit others into her sphere. Locals call these groups recruitment parties. David Morrison, a hunting guide in Pocahontas County, has meticulously documented encounters since 1990. He describes groups of seemingly ordinary people moving in unnatural, synchronized patterns toward the hollow. From a distance, they appear normal. Up close, however, they display coordination, focus, and purpose that defy explanation. Disturbingly, Morrison has recognized long missing persons within these groups, including individuals who vanished decades prior. One such case involved Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a folklore researcher who disappeared in 1963. Morrison observed her in 2019 as part of a recruitment party. Photographs show figures walking in single file, yet casting no shadows despite bright sunlight. Independent analysis confirms no digital manipulation. The hollow seems capable of bending physical reality to maintain its influence, drawing both the living and the lost into its orbit. Behavioral patterns of recruits are consistent. Individuals report dreams or visions, instructing them to guide others, provide directions, or even relocate personal belongings for the hollow's unseen presence. Attempts to resist often result in severe psychological distress, including anxiety, insomnia, and hallucinations. Children are not spared. Elementary students across the US have depicted the hollow in artwork with unsettling accuracy: forests, cabins, and the gaunt widow herself, despite no prior exposure to Appalachian folklore. Some attempt to leave home at night, claiming the widow requires their attention. International cases mirror these patterns. Norwegian software developer Henrik Len began experiencing vivid visions after participating in an online discussion about American supernatural phenomena. His dreams evolved into detailed sketches of the hollow and buildings destroyed decades before his birth. Verification confirmed their accuracy. Despite interventions, he traveled to West Virginia, ultimately disappearing along the familiar trailhead pattern. The digital age has amplified the hollow's reach. Images, videos, and detailed written accounts act as conduits, transmitting Gallagher's influence globally. Dr. Michael Chen, a Stanford computer scientist, confirms measurable neurological changes in subjects exposed to imagery of the hollow. Temporal lobe activity intensifies, enhancing susceptibility to dreams and compulsions. Remarkably, repeated exposure strengthens these effects, creating a cumulative, self-reinforcing cycle. The hollow's recruitment network is expanding, subtly yet relentlessly. Each new victim serves as both conduit and amplifier, drawing more minds into Gallagher's ever-growing influence. What began in the Appalachian Mountains now traverses continents, aided by modern communication, yet still anchored to the ancient darkness of West Virginia's hills. Next, we explore the economic and societal consequences of Gallagher's influence, how supernatural activity reshapes communities, property values, and local livelihoods. And the influence of Martha Gallagher extends far beyond dreams and disappearances. It leaves tangible marks on communities and economies. Areas identified as supernatural hotspots have experienced dramatic declines in property values, often falling by nearly 40% over the past 2 decades. Families who inherited land in these regions struggle to sell or insure their homes, trapped between fear and financial necessity. Insurance companies have created specialized policies to exclude damages deemed paranormal in origin. Homes struck by unexplained phenomena, collapsing structures, fires without cause, or sudden infestations are routinely denied coverage. Victims often face devastating losses without recourse, compounding the rural poverty that already plagues the Appalachian region. Local businesses fare no better. Entrepreneurs attempting to monetize supernatural folklore through tours or paranormal investigations encounter high staff turnover, frequent equipment failures, and alarming customer incidents. Martha Gallagher's influence is especially insidious in the workforce. Employees in hotspot areas report persistent unease, nightmares, and psychological compulsions akin to those experienced by direct visitors to the Hollow. Over time, many abandon their jobs or leave entire regions, creating pockets of economic stagnation that ripple across the mountains. Hospitality, retail, and outdoor tourism industries all suffer as fear drives away visitors and limits investment. Public infrastructure also bears the strain. Schools, hospitals, and community centers near active sites must contend with affected individuals displaying Gallagher syndrome symptoms. Emergency services often respond to nocturnal wandering, unexplained panic, and sudden disappearances. Teachers report children obsessively reproducing the Hollow in artwork, sometimes revealing knowledge of Appalachian geography or hidden pathways without ever visiting the area. Local authorities struggle to classify these incidents, oscillating between psychiatric crises, child welfare concerns, and paranormal explanations. Medical professionals have documented physiological consequences as well. Dr. Patricia Santos, an ER physician in Charleston, West Virginia, has treated patients presenting with Gallagher syndrome over the past decade. Victims exhibit severe dehydration, neurological changes, While the Hollow's economic and societal impacts are alarming, the most unsettling aspect of Martha Gallagher's legacy lies in its effect on the human mind. Researchers studying victims of Gallagher syndrome have documented physiological and neurological changes that defy conventional understanding. Brain scans reveal abnormal activity patterns, particularly in the temporal lobes, areas associated with memory, spatial navigation, and emotional processing. Even under sedation, affected individuals maintain heightened neural activity, suggesting consciousness remains partially anchored to external, often supernatural, stimuli. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a neuroscientist involved in classified studies at MIT, describes Gallagher-related exposure as a form of consciousness modification. Victims exhibit structural brain changes over time. These are permanent, progressive, and resistant to medical intervention. Traditional psychiatric therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, pharmacological treatment, or even long-term hospitalization appear largely ineffective. Patients continue to experience vivid dreams of the Hollow, compulsions to return, and perceived interactions with Martha Gallagher herself. Neurological anomalies are not limited to adults. Children exposed indirectly through artwork, stories, or even casual conversation about the hollow display early signs of structural changes. Pediatric neurologists have observed increased activity in memory and spatial awareness centers corresponding to knowledge of the hollow's geography that cannot be explained by learning or experience. Remarkably, these children often demonstrate detailed understanding of Appalachian terrain and forest pathways despite never visiting the region. Exposure also induces profound psychological effects. Victims report feelings of guilt, obsessive compulsion, and urgent responsibility to guide theirs to the hollow. These instructions appear uniform across individuals with no prior contact, suggesting a non-localized, possibly supernatural vector of influence. The digital age has amplified this effect. Photographs, videos, and written descriptions of the Gallagher property can trigger symptoms remotely, creating a form of contagious consciousness. Medical professionals observe additional physiological stress markers. Severe dehydration, elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep cycles, and signs of trauma appear in patients who report only dreams or brief hallucinations of the hollow. Blood chemistry indicates prolonged exposure to life-threatening stress, even when victims have not physically faced danger. This phenomenon challenges traditional medical and psychiatric frameworks, suggesting an external force directly impacting human biology. The hollow's influence also complicates research efforts. Scientists studying Gallagher syndrome frequently develop symptoms themselves, leading to suspended fieldwork and the need for remote data analysis. Graduate students and researchers report compulsions to visit the hollow, vivid nightmares, and shared visions with patients, evidence that the syndrome can spread even among trained observers. Next, we discover the global spread of Gallagher-related phenomena, showing how the hollow's influence transcends geographical and cultural boundaries. The strange reach of Martha Gallagher's hollow is no longer confined to the Appalachian Mountains. Evidence now suggests her influence extends across continents, affecting individuals who have never set foot near West Virginia. International paranormal researchers have documented consistent manifestations of Gallagher phenomena in countries as far-flung as Norway, Japan, and Brazil. These cases demonstrate that exposure to descriptions, images, or even digital representations of the hollow can trigger compulsions, visions, and dreams identical to those experienced by direct visitors. The case of Henrik Len, a Norwegian software developer, provides a chilling example. In February 2018, after participating in an online forum about American supernatural sites, Len began experiencing detailed, realistic dreams of the hollow. Within weeks, these dreams evolved into precise visions of the Gallagher cabin, complete with interior layouts and surrounding forest topography he had no way of knowing. His sketches, made before any attempt to visit the site, matched historical photographs and architectural records that had never been publicly released. Despite interventions by family and mental health professionals, Len ultimately traveled to West Virginia and disappeared, following the pattern seen in previous victims. Similar cases have emerged across Europe and Asia. Researchers report individuals experiencing Gallagher-like compulsions after engaging with digital content, images, videos, or texts related to the hollow. The phenomenon exhibits astonishing consistency. All subjects describe the sad lady, the cabin, and the surrounding forest with uncanny accuracy. Some victims even report conversations with Martha Gallagher, receiving instructions to lead others toward the hollow, mirroring behaviors of local Appalachian victims. Children have proven to be especially sensitive to this global transmission. Across diverse cultural contexts, children exposed to stories, media, or online discussions about Gallagher phenomena create detailed drawings of the hollow, often including the gaunt figure of the widow standing at the forest's edge. Many express a need to visit the site to provide comfort or companionship, despite lacking prior knowledge of Appalachian geography. Psychologists studying these children note no previous exposure to Appalachian folklore, reinforcing the notion of a non-localized, infectious consciousness. Digital media appears to amplify the hollow's reach. Exposure creates measurable neurological changes, heightened temporal lobe activity, enhanced memory recall, and abnormal spatial awareness. Successive exposures intensify these effects, suggesting a cumulative neurological imprint capable of transforming casual curiosity into dangerous compulsion. In essence, The hollow now exists in the digital realm, extending its influence far beyond its physical location. Martha Gallagher's reach illustrates a terrifying reality. Her legacy is no longer contained. Her consciousness, or whatever force she represents, spreads invisibly through modern networks, drawing victims into her orbit worldwide. Cultural boundaries, geography, and age are no barriers. The hollow's shadow now stretches across the globe. Next, we discover how children become conduits for Gallagher's influence, their innocence manipulated to extend the hollow's power. In the expanding web of Gallagher phenomena, one of the most disturbing trends involves children. Across the United States and now globally, children with no prior exposure to Appalachian culture are inexplicably drawn into visions of the hollow. Teachers, parents, and psychologists report clusters of students creating remarkably detailed artwork of the forested mountains, the dilapidated cabin, and the gaunt widow known simply as the Sad Lady. The precision of these drawings is uncanny. Topography, tree lines, and even furniture placement in the cabin match historical records. Affected children often speak of the widow as if she were a real presence in their lives. They describe her loneliness, her grief over lost loved ones, and a desperate need for companionship. The children express worry, sometimes begging to visit or provide for her, believing they can ease her suffering. These behaviors are not the result of games or imagination. Psychologists have confirmed that these children exhibit neurological and psychological responses identical to adults who have visited or studied the Gallagher Hollow. Reports show that children affected by the hollow develop intense compulsions to act on the widow's perceived requests. Some attempt to leave their homes at night to visit her, while others try to guide peers or family members toward directions associated with the hollow. Teachers recount students spending hours perfecting their artwork, including cryptic details of the cabin's interior and forest paths, despite having no prior knowledge of Appalachian geography. Medical and psychological analyses suggest the children are not hallucinating. Rather, they are experiencing a form of direct psychological influence transmitted by Gallagher's residual presence. Brain imaging shows abnormal activity in regions tied to spatial memory, fear conditioning, and empathy, patterns, hence nearly identical to those observed in adult victims. Exposure appears to create a lasting imprint on consciousness, effectively turning the children into involuntary conduits for the hollow's influence. The global digital age has exacerbated this phenomenon. Children encountering photographs, stories, or videos of the hollow online often become the first point of international transmission. Through them, Gallagher's influence bypasses geographic constraints entirely, creating new cycles of compulsion, dreams, and eventual obsession. It is as if the hollow has learned to reproduce itself through human minds, particularly those most impressionable. Martha Gallagher's reach through children underscores a horrifying reality. Her presence is no longer passive. It actively seeks new hosts, spreading through curiosity, empathy, and innocence. What begins as fascination can quickly escalate into obsession, with the children unknowingly participating in the hollow's perpetuation. Next, we discover how the economic and social fabric of Appalachian communities is unraveling under the influence of the hollow, and how local populations cope with this invisible threat. The influence of Martha Gallagher stretches far beyond psychological terror. It now manifests in the very livelihoods of Appalachian communities. Towns surrounding the hollow have experienced steep declines in property values, sometimes dropping by as much as 40% over 2 decades. Homes near documented supernatural sites are considered virtually unsellable, and insurance companies classify incidents as paranormal, denying coverage for losses or damage. Families are left financially exposed, trapped in properties haunted not just by folklore, but by active, documented phenomena. Attempts to exploit the legend for tourism have consistently failed. Paranormal tours, ghost hunting excursions, and folklore festivals in affected areas report unusual rates of employee turnover, equipment failure, and accidents. Guides vanish inexplicably or develop compulsions mirroring those of previous visitors. Business owners in towns like Pocahontas County report workers quitting after encountering unexplained activity at night, including faint whispers, shifting shadows, and fleeting glimpses of a tall, sorrowful woman at the forest's edge. Local economies struggle under this invisible pressure. Retailers and restaurants face labor shortages. School systems grapple with unusual student absences linked to Gallagher phenomena. and emergency services encounter cases of psychological crises tied to supernatural exposure. Even those not directly affected report a pervasive sense of unease, an undercurrent of fear that discourages investment and civic growth. Medical professionals treating those affected by Gallagher syndrome report alarming physical manifestations. Patients often arrive with severe dehydration, exhaustion, and stress-related chemical markers, despite no evidence of physical trauma. Brain scans show persistent activation in regions associated with heightened awareness and spatial processing, suggesting a form of prolonged vigilance or engagement with external stimuli beyond conscious control. Communities witness a pattern of stress contagion where the trauma experienced by a few can ripple outward, influencing neighbors, relatives, and co-workers, further destabilizing social structures. Efforts to regulate access to the hollow are met with limited success. Environmental protections and restricted zones maintained by the Department of Interior prevent casual entry, but they cannot stop digital exposure or human curiosity. Online communities documenting Gallagher-related phenomena inadvertently accelerate her reach, spreading compulsion and obsession beyond the immediate Appalachian region. The hollow's psychological footprint grows wider with every shared photograph, story, or discussion, creating a web of influence that entwines modern technology with ancient forces. The economic consequences are intertwined with cultural and social decay. Once thriving communities become ghost towns, not solely because of depopulation, but because the land itself has become a conduit for enduring supernatural influence. Residents learn to avoid certain areas at night, businesses close earlier than usual, and regional tourism collapses under the invisible threat that cannot be mitigated or explained. The hollow's grip extends through fear, obsession, and compulsion, shaping both human behavior and economic outcomes in ways that defy conventional logic. Next, we uncover the terrifying scientific research into Gallagher syndrome, revealing neurological and psychological transformations in those exposed to the hollow's influence, and the chilling possibility that her consciousness is infectious. As we reach the closing chapter of Martha Gallagher's story, the full scope of her influence becomes undeniable. Her presence is no longer confined to Appalachia. It has transcended geography, time, and even life itself. Modern neuroscience and international case studies reveal that exposure to her hollow produces permanent changes in human consciousness. Those affected display heightened memory retention, spatial awareness, and behavioral compulsions, often mirroring the exact patterns of prior victims. Even under sedation, brain scans show that their minds remain fixated on the hollow and its eternal inhabitant. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a neuroscientist at MIT, warns privately that Gallagher's consciousness may function as a form of infectious awareness. Her influence propagates through both physical visits and digital exposure, spreading with alarming efficiency across continents. Online forums, videos, photographs, and written descriptions act as modern conduits, pulling new victims into her sphere. Reports from children as young as 6 reveal that her presence can manifest even without direct exposure, guiding their dreams, artwork, and behavior with unnerving precision. These incidents demonstrate a level of psychological manipulation that surpasses conventional understanding, suggesting intelligence or intent behind the phenomena. International manifestations underscore her reach. Cases in Europe and Asia reveal individuals possessing detailed knowledge of the hollow and Martha's personal history, despite never visiting Appalachia. Some, like Norwegian software developer Henrik Len, experience vivid dreams, produce accurate architectural sketches of the hollow, and ultimately disappear, following the same mysterious trail as previous victims. The pattern repeats, generation after generation, expanding her network of influence without bounds. Martha Gallagher's Law. Legacy now encompasses social, economic, and neurological domains. Entire communities live under the weight of her unseen presence. Economic instability, psychological trauma, and disrupted daily life mark regions near the hollow. Workers abandon jobs, families struggle to maintain homes, and children unknowingly propagate her influence through artistic or verbal expressions. The digital age amplifies her reach, connecting isolated events into a global phenomenon that defies both logic and scientific explanation. Astrological and seasonal cycles appear to amplify her activity. New moon periods in late autumn consistently coincide with peak supernatural incidents, suggesting that her influence obeys natural rhythms unknown to modern science. Dr. Robert Chen's research indicates that these cycles are growing more frequent and intense, with projections showing potential widespread activity throughout the Appalachian Range and beyond in the coming decades. Humanity is facing a force not easily contained, understood, or combated. Martha Gallagher is more than a ghost. She represents an enduring consciousness that persists long after physical death. The hollow waits patiently, ever vigilant, drawing new souls into its web. Her patience is infinite, her hunger unending, and her reach stretches farther with each story told, each image shared, and each curious mind drawn to her shadowed world. In the end, the tale of Martha Gallagher serves as a dire warning. Some forces predate civilization itself and are capable of shaping human thought, society, and even neurological function. The widow's hollow is not a relic of the past, it is a living, expanding influence. And for those who dare to seek it, her call is eternal, echoing across time, space, and consciousness itself. Before we conclude, remember, the Gallagher Hollow does not forgive curiosity. Every photograph, every chartier, read story, every mental image strengthens her reach. If you find yourself thinking about her, know that her vigil may already have begun around you.